thank you all for coming. I'm going to say very little because Erika likes to talk, she told me. So, but I'm going to basically just ask some questions. And if you at any time want to ask a question or, say anything, please feel free. It's going to be very informal. So with that, we're ready.
Okay.
Well, Erika, just tell us a little bit about you.
Okay. So I am Erika Dueck. For those of you that don't know me, I was born and raised in Manitoba. I did my bachelor's degree in fine art at the University of Manitoba. I finished, I'm not very good at the time, so I think this is 2013.
Correct.
And thank you.
We graduated together.
It's true. That's how we met.
Yeah.
And then I went and I did my Master's of Fine Art at the University of Guelph. And that was 2016, I think, that I finished. And I've been teaching sessionally at the University of Manitoba in fine arts. So some of these faces are students I've had and maybe I will have. And so, I don't know, what else do I don't know. What else do I need to say? I think that's a little good. Yeah.
Okay. So,
Come on in. Come on in.
I first came across your work in the University of Manitoba's 2013 BFA graduate exhibition. Your piece, The Ephemeral Mind, was the highlight of the exhibition and went on to win the BMO Bank of Montreal First International Student Art Competition. So can you talk about that piece and how that came about?
Yeah. So I'll just kind of describe what the artwork looked like at first, because some of you didn't get a chance to see it. So you walked into a dark room and it was pitch black, and there was this huge object floating, seeming to float in the air, and it was glowing. It was about 6 foot in diameter, so round and about 8 feet tall, and it kind of looked like a swirling, tornado. Some people thought it looked like a flower or like a brain, and so it was made out of tracing paper, the outside of it, so really delicate, but there was light shining through it. And then when you went closer, you saw openings in the paper shell, and inside were 6 miniature brooms. And that is actually when I started working with miniatures. So on the inside, they were storage spaces, library kind of storage spaces. So there was boxes and books and papers and all sorts of paper type of objects. And the way it was actually a little bit of a leap for me to start working with miniatures, because in my bachelor's degree, I didn't take any sculpture courses, and I had been working with 2D mediums, so I had been doing photography, printmaking, I did some graphic design, but I had this idea in my final year, and so then it had to be made sculpturally. So the idea that started all of that was when I was a little girl. I was 6 years old, and I heard adults talking about how they didn't remember anything before the age of 12. And I thought, that's crazy! That's my whole life! Like, how could they not know everything that I know? That's just terrible. So I thought, I can't let that happen. And like, why are they forgetting all of these important things? It must be that you have, your memories are written down, and then they've put them in a box, and they forget where they put the box, or maybe they forgot like a whole room full of memories, and that's all their childhood memories, and now they don't know where they are anymore. And I thought, well, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to make sure I remember where I keep all my boxes of memories, and so I had regular memory cleaning days where I would tell myself my stories. And I guess I was supposed to be listening in class, but I was probably like off in another land, telling myself my stories. And And I did that as a little girl, and then as a teenager, and I still do that now. And so as a result, I still have memories from the end of 2 years old, beginning of 3 years old. And so that first project was supposed to be an exploration.
Your memory from 2 years old.
Oh, there is actually. The reason it was so important to me was because my Oma died when I was 3 years old and a month or two. I wasn't good at time then either. I was only 3. But anyway, she passed away when I was very young. And so those memories, most of those earliest ones are of her. So one of them was an artwork that I made. I thought my Oma was magic because it was summertime and my mom was taking care of her because she had bone cancer. And so we were outside and my Oma was sitting next to me and the dogs started barking. And there was a bird trapped under the tree, so she shooed them away, and then she went and picked it up. And this is when I was 2, and I thought, she's magic. She can talk to the birds. Like, I didn't know my Oma knew how to speak to the birds, and I thought, this is amazing. And so she held it, and then she let me pet it, and I thought, what an amazing moment. And then so that was one of the memories I visited. And as a little girl, after she had passed away, I would talk to birds all the time. I'd be like, you know me, you knew my Oma. And I was like, I'm making progress, I'm getting closer. But thus far, I still haven't made the same progress. They still don't seem to connect with me the same way. Anyway, so that's some of the memories I revisited. And so that whole work was about all these memories built up over a lifetime and lost, found, altered because of disorganization and misfiling and its jumbled thoughts. And so everything was just this large expanding space. And I wanted the initial object, like that paper shell, to be abstract when you walk in and you don't even realize that there's this whole world that's contained inside. So anyway, next question.
Anybody? Okay. Well, I think many of the people in the room are probably going to university at U of M in the School of Art. So you finished your BFA in 2013. And then you went on to do your master's in fine arts eventually.
Yes.
So can you tell us about that experience and what the graduate school experience was like?
Okay. Do you want me to start with my first trip?
Sure.
My first misstep was after I finished my bachelor's degree, I applied for fine art programs and also landscape architecture programs because I am interested in how people move through spaces, and I mean I'm working with miniatures and thinking about designing spaces, and I love plants, so I thought like, oh, that's so interesting. I can think about how plants change from spring to summer to fall, and then in winter, and then how people move through spaces and light and dark, day and night, and I thought that'll be perfect. So I applied for these different programs, and I did not get accepted into any fine art programs, and I got accepted into the landscape architecture programs. And I thought, well, you know, some doors close, some doors open, and that's okay. I'll walk through the doors that are opening, and this will be great. So I went into landscape architecture, and by October, I was like, I gotta get out of here. This is terrible. And I was lying on the floor of our apartment while my husband cooked dinner. He was stepping over me and I was crying. Get out of here. So it started off really sad. I finished that year. And that's a true story. I'm not being dramatic, or maybe I am, but it is true. Anyway. So then I got accepted into a Master's of Fine Art in Guelph. So And it is a great program. It felt right, it felt good, and it's still hard. It doesn't mean that there weren't hard moments, but there was no more crying on the floor. That part was done. Woo! Anyway, so how did my work change? There was a few things that happened. One thing that happened was at the end of every semester, you have to have completed work finished. So that means 3 months, you have to have something finished. And that first experimentation with that large sculpture I had done, I had started in September and then ended in April. So that was a much larger time frame to work with it. And so starting in Guelph and having to have something done in 3 months meant some of my works became smaller. I always have these big ideas, but I had to cut it back. Another thing that happened is I had been told my work was theatrical before I went there, and I thought, okay. But then when I got there, they also said, your work is theatrical, but they said it kind of in a negative way. And so I thought, oh, I guess that's not a good thing? I have no idea. Anyway, they hated the shell. And I was like, no, I'm gonna keep working with the shell because it was really important to me. I wanted the spaces, I always wanted there to seem to be more space that you couldn't access. And the shell kind of blended where things started and where they began. Like it always looked like there was more that you couldn't access in the inside of the sculpture. And I thought without a shell, you can see exactly where everything is beginning and ending. And then you don't have an expansion of space. And that was not going to work for me. So as a result, I thought without a shell, I'm going to have to start working with meters so that it starts distorting the spaces. And so that was I still wasn't convinced. I thought that people would see like a sculpture like this and go, oh, okay, it's so simple. You look in, the space extends horizontally, but the magic would be over. But I found that the rough exteriors, even though it's so simple, because they stretch out in other directions, it does become like a new space, kind of almost separate from the outside of the sculpture. And the fact that the outside looks so rough and kind of clumsy, and then the inside looks meticulously done, that also creates a disconnect that makes the spaces still seem to be a separate space from the object that you're looking at. So, and then I started shifting away from specifically thinking about memory, and I started to see these spaces kind of as psychological spaces and exploring other ideas. So that work and that work and that work were pieces that I completed in my master's. So, yeah.
Okay. Anybody wants to
Any
jump?
questions?
Okay, I'll ask you a question.
Okay, sure.
When I think about the 3 words, things fall apart, a vast number of meanings and interpretations spring to mind. Why did you pick these 3 words as the title of the exhibition?
So I had a whole bunch of different working titles, and I don't know, it just didn't seem to be coming together, like the title. I stumbled across a poem. Okay, I just want to check my notes. I'm not very good with names. I made sure to take some notes. So it's by Yeats, and it's called The Second Coming. And there's a line in the poem that that says, things fall apart, the center cannot hold. And obviously, the second coming, it's about, the world coming to an end, and some of those ideas about destruction, things falling apart, those are ideas that I was playing with in all of these works. And so in all of them, I wanted there to be kind of a space. There's spaces where destruction is happening. There's things where reality is kind of becoming loosened. And so, yeah, even the materials themselves, like this is just foam core. It's so light, it's so ephemeral, like it's cardboard and paper. I made one of these artworks for a commission, and somebody had said, well, what happens if there's a fire? And I was like, it'll be like, that's it, it's gone. Like, so don't let anyone smoke while they're looking in there. Like, it's all ephemeral. So the spaces that I'm thinking about are spaces that are falling apart and being renewed. The materials that I'm using as I'm working on them, they're like this one. There's a dent on the material. I just finished the sculpture. It was so perfect and beautiful. And then I was vacuuming something next to me, and the vacuum cleaner fell, and then I was like, no! But this is the materials that I'm using. Like they want to be simple and light and airy, but then they also, And so, in all of these spaces, I want there to be a tension about whether, well, I guess some of them, like this one I'm looking at right now, it's just piles of trash. But, I mean, in the other spaces like this one, there's this growth that's bursting through the walls, and it's looking beautiful, and there's something alluring, but then you also think, what is this growth once it takes over? Is that becoming something terrible as it just destroys everything, or is the new thing that's about to come even more beautiful? And so I'm trying to play with these ideas of cycles, nothing staying the same, and letting the viewer decide what they think the outcome will be, whether there's hope or despair, or maybe a bit of both, who knows?
So is it both an explanation and a prediction?
I don't know. Explanation, prediction. Well, I guess things fall apart is a prediction. It will happen. It is inevitable. You can't keep things the same. And so, but what will happen that none of us know. So, questions from you guys?
You're answering all the questions. Yeah, that's right. I was going to ask about materials. And you just,
materials.
Well, that's sort of the next question.
Oh, okay. I don't even remember.
So I'm curious, as I'm sure a lot of people are, I'm curious about your process. So how do these things come about? Do the interiors come first? Do the exteriors come first? Do the pathways come first? The visual ways that you navigate through this? Like, how do you go about, are there drawings, sketches, CAD?
No CAD.
No CAD.
Leave that in the past.
That's the future.
Anyway, I'm sorry if you guys love CAD. That's good. Anyway, process. It all depends. Sometimes the interior, sometimes I know what I want the first room to look like, and then the sculpture builds off of that. Sometimes I have no idea what the rooms are filled with, but I know the outside structure. So I'll just go, or maybe I'll just go through them. So I think this is the first thing. I made first. I don't know. That one now. This one, actually, I started with the exterior. I wanted it to be, I was making these shorter towers, and then I started thinking of, once again, putting more spaces within one structure. So I didn't like the idea of just having one place to look in. So I was going to put them back to back. They were still going to be short, and then it was going to go like this. And so I actually made this to look completely different. And then I started filling the rooms, but I hated it. It was so terrible. I don't know, it just was garbage. And so I was like, well, what am I going to do? And so the nice thing about these materials, foam core, is I can change my mind and I can slice it up and make something new. Whereas if it's, because I had already filled the interior, it was already done. And then I did some Frankenstein shifting around and then figured out how to attach those bolts and stuff like that. And then suddenly I had a tower, a really high tower. And yeah, so that was really exciting. In this one, I knew it was actually a companion piece for another sculpture. So the other sculpture, you look down into it, and it looks like it's shooting through the floor, and you're looking at a library space from above. And so I thought, like, that one was full of books and full of papers. It looked like like a 3-story room from above, but most of the details you couldn't see because it was so dark. And I was like, okay, with that, I need to have a companion piece where it's empty but full of light. And then it's these two contrasting spaces. Like the other one was dark, looking down, but the sculpture actually went upwards. And this one I thought, I'm going to have it filled with light, and I just wasn't sure how the doorways would be lined up. And so some of the students have already heard this part of my story, but that's okay, because there's still more new stories coming. But anyway, so that one, I was already working on the structure, and then I just wasn't sure where to put the doors. I wasn't sure if one door should be here, and the other one should be there. And I always have radio or TV on in the background while I'm working, so I had Interstellar on, and then, oh man, I just forgot. Matt Damon, right?
No, Matthew McConaughey.
Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, I made the same mistake in the artist talk. That's hilarious.
In your defense, 2 movies came out at almost the same time.
It's not an excuse. It doesn't matter. Matthew McConaughey, who cares? Anyway, so he was talking about how black holes work, and then the illusion he used, I'll go like this so the people over there can see. So there's a piece of paper, and if you have a hole cut on either side, and then you fold it in half, those 2 holes are touching. But if you unfold the paper, suddenly the hole on this side and the hole on this side are at a great distance. And so it's kind of this idea of how can you go through a black hole and travel, suddenly be in another space. But it's like those spaces are touching, but they're also a great distance. And I thought, that's exactly what I need for that sculpture. I need the doors to be touching. I need them to be so close. But when you look into the sculpture, it looks like it goes 12 feet through the wall. So that if you could enter the space, maybe you would end up in a totally different place, or maybe you'd end up in this endless cycle, this prison. And so that was what I was thinking with that one. This one, the structure came first, but I knew I wanted it hanging because there's these floating books in here, and when it's hanging, you get like a little bit of vibration when somebody like does one of these, like punk, and then you see the books start quivering inside. And I thought if you have it on a stand, then you don't get that little bit of movement, so just a little bit of shaking, and then suddenly it's like alive inside. And no mechanical things, like I just wanted it to be real life. Yeah, this was also kind I knew I had to have a staircase, so it's one of those things, I know some of the elements, but then I did sketches of what could all be in this hallway, so, you know, you do all these sketches, you do all this planning, and then you also think, okay, what materials am I going to use? Because how do I make that? So and then you go to Walmart or Home Depot or Dollarama or a thrift store, and then you wander, and then they say, can I help you find anything? And you say, I don't know, because you don't. And it's like, well, what are you looking for? It's like something maybe black and like little. Do you know anything like that? So it doesn't really help. So you're just kind of searching for random things. And for this sculpture, this main room came first. And like almost immediately then the overall, like the layout came second. But I didn't know what was going to go in any of the other rooms. But that's okay, because working with these materials, it takes so long to fill like that first room that I then have time to start planning the next room. And then I go, I'll write down ideas and different themes or kind of, yeah, different things, brainstorm, and then it's always that back and forth between materials, how I can build it, what main ideas I'm trying to explore, and yeah. Some of the rooms, like that, the first room in there, did end up exactly the way I sketched it. Sometimes I make, and then this room I made first, this room I made second. This looks totally different than my sketch, completely. But responding to the materials, and it was the intention that I had, but just looked different. Anyway. Questions?
Still no questions. Okay, well, let's go to this piece in particular, because this is the last one you made. You made it this summer.
Yes.
I guess specifically for the show.
Specifically for the show.
So talk a little bit more about this piece and how it came about and why you did it.
Okay. So I knew I wanted to make a new, well, I should say, I had dreams of making a sculpture, maybe two, also maybe some wall work. So as you can see, bigger dreams than what I was able to do. So there's other things in here. I just need a bit more time. Anyway, so I was thinking about these ideas of the other works. I think they're, like I said, thinking about spaces of hope, despair, destruction, renewal, and that's what I was thinking about for this. But actually, before I got the chance to start working on this, I had a miscarriage this summer. So that's also why I didn't get more done, because it was really hard. And so anyway, I put all of those ideas actually into this artwork because that's all I could think about. But I started seeing how the ideas that I'm playing with in the show actually connect with some of those experiences that I've been having. So I'll just give a quick and then explanation. I have something called adenomyosis. So what happens is every month with these cycles, these cells have migrated into the uterus, and there's nowhere for all that to go. So it builds up, and when it's tearing down, has nowhere to go. So the lining of the uterus becomes thickened and hardened and bigger, right? And so I was thinking about this process of like building up, tearing down, creating something, and then destroying it. And that started making me think about these other larger ideas that, like, we're doing that, I'm doing that with our house, you know, buy an old house. There's all these layers built up over the years, and then you tear it down, and then you build it up, and you try to make it new, and you try to make it fresh. And then, you know, even with the world around us. We're seeing that we're building up, tearing down, building up, tearing down, and there's all these cycles of renewal. But then there's these bigger questions about what is that doing to our environment, and there's these issues with global warming, and so all of that started to come all together in this artwork. So where should I start? I guess I kind of already started. But okay, so for the first space, I started thinking about with my own body, it feels like you think you have control, but then maybe your body starts taking over and doing its own thing and restructuring itself, and it's kind of it's the same experience that someone might have with, cancer. It's like the body is doing its thing and it takes over and it decides to restructure itself into that. So I thought, well, I want to have a room that it looks as though the building itself is beginning to restructure itself, and it's this growth, and you don't really know what the outcome is going to be because you think you have control over the building, but now the building has control over you. And I mean, that's one of those larger things we're talking about with our planet. We think we have control, but it's taking over, and we don't quite know how it's restructuring itself. And so, yeah, I think some of those ideas, obviously my trash room where, I think about my house, you have all these layers that you tear down, and then maybe you get it cleaned up, maybe it's out of your house. It's not completely out of my house, but, bringing some of this stuff to the dump, even when I was there, like, your house looks fresh and clean, but then we get to the dump and we're throwing it on a pile, and it feels like, oh, this is terrible. Like, this isn't cleaned up. This is just sitting here. What are we doing with this stuff? And so all of those ideas came together and are all layered in this work. So it was a really hard summer, but it felt like I could get those ideas into this artwork and not just have them stuck in my head. And so, yeah.
So you called that the trash room.
Yeah.
Do the other rooms have names or themes?
Well, yeah, they all have names. Here.
If you want to tell us about
Sure. Okay. All right. Here we go. I already told you about this room. Told you about that room. This room, I was thinking about, like, there's that red thing in there. It's kind of like a vine, and it's kind of like, maybe blood vessels or something. And I was thinking of this, kind of, that, once again, for me, this idea of, like, these cycles of the body, it's supposed to be nourishment, but it can also become, like, poisonous, as it is not actually functioning in the way it's supposed to be functioning. And so I'll just leave that at that. So that's some of I wanted this plant life that's not quite plant life. It's red, so I don't know what it is. It's an alien growth, maybe. And this is kind of like two rooms in one. There's plants. Honestly, I didn't know what I was going to put in the front room, but in the hallway, as I was walking in and out of my house, and the sunroom is full of stuff. Like I said, the trash room's kind of like our house. Not quite, but anyway, we're a work in progress. So, as I'm walking through there's these failed attempts at sustaining life in our house. There's dead house plants that you have them dead for a while, and then you're eventually like, okay, it's dead. Like, there hasn't been anything green on here for like 2 months, like get it out, and we don't have anywhere to put it, so you just put it in the sunroom as your shade. And so, yeah, this, all of failed attempts at nurturing life, I thought that I'm gonna fill a whole hallway with all of these plants that have maybe died at different stages and are tucked kind of away, and then the front space. That one was hard for me. I couldn't figure out what to do. I think I did a different room first, and then putting those plants in there, the live ones, and then it started looking very controlled and just so, and I thought that would be a nice contrast to have this kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like in a greenhouse where, you've got just the right amount of moisture, you've got just the right amount of light, and then, when it's a commercial greenhouse, it's maybe all of the same thing, all planted at the same time, there's no variation, and so kind of these two spaces, like we can control our world, and we do, but then that's only when we have all the variables controlled. As soon as we try shifting outside of that, it's harder to control and things start falling apart. Oh gosh. Erika. Anyway, it all ties in. Yeah.
Okay, that's it for me. So I'm hoping there's more questions.
Oh, yes. Open.
What you see is what you get sort of effect as opposed to bending pathways.
No way. What you see is what you get. No. No. Actually, I think, maybe not in every artwork, but in these artworks, I want you to leave slightly, maybe dissatisfied, like, oh, what was, like, why can't I see around there? Like, I want you to be a little bit like, she didn't show me something, like, you look in this room, and you're like, but what's on that shelf? I can see she filled it, and you know what? It's totally filled. It's beautiful. It is. And then I spend all this time, and I make it look just so, and then I shove it in the corner, and then you can see that there's something there, but you can't see all of it. I want there to be, like, that desire for more, because I think that's important. And I don't really know why, but it must be. That's all I know. It must be. And even something like, there's maybe a sixth satisfaction, like this. Like I threw a fridge in there, and it took maybe like 3 hours to make, and then I took a picture of it, and I sent it to my mom and said, look at this fridge I made. And she was like, wow, that's so great. And she came over, and she was like, you just threw it in the back. Like, you can barely see it. No one will notice it. And I was like, I know, it's fantastic. Like, why? I don't know. I want you to see that it's there, but that you can't see it all. I think there is something about, like, desire and not, I don't want to fully give you everything that you want. I don't know why. Did that answer the question?
Yeah,
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, Eric.
You're a very good teacher,
Oh, thank you.
and you've been teaching a lot of courses, and there are a lot of different courses, and they're quite often for the first time in a term.
Yes.
And so it's amazing how you're able to do all this work and the teaching at the same time.
Well, other things are falling behind, like you said.
But I'm wondering if you could talk about, like, maybe how the work is influencing your teaching, and or if the teaching is influencing your work, if that's possible to talk about those things?
Okay.
You can say no.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say no. I just have to think. So, okay, one obvious way that the work has affected my teaching, I don't have enough time in the studio, so.
But I mean in terms of like, you know.
Yeah,
there's-
I know. That's just the beginning way.
Okay.
But, so, I think that when I teach and I'm designing the courses, then as I'm planning each assignment, I start going, oh, I could do this, I could do that. And so there is a lot of, it's not necessarily miniatures though, it's actually other things. And then I get really excited about, oh, I should try this, I should experiment with that. And so that I find really stimulating, and I mean, who knows what actually filters through to the work. And I love teaching. Like, obviously, I enjoy talking, so like this. And so that, I mean, that I just find enriching, and it's fun, and it's exciting, and I like to try and help students to figure out what their ideas are. But like, when I go into the studios and make the miniatures though, I do feel a little bit like I go into a cocoon, and I kind of start shutting out all those other things, and I do think, like, in this case, like, what are the only thoughts that are going through my mind? What am I thinking about? And then how can I start teasing out those ideas and exploring them in different ways? So, yeah.
Thanks.
Any questions?
Well, it's kind of warm in here, so
Yeah, it's so true.
I guess that's it for the formal thing, part of the program. Erika, you'll be willing to talk to some more,
Very
I'm sure.
willing to talk to
So we'll just end it on that note, and please hang out and